Okay. So for those of you who just joined, I just wanted to welcome everyone to today's Training Academy. And this academy is being supported by INTAC as well as the transformation team, which is a part of INTAC, entitled Community Wellness and Peer Support. Next slide. We'll cover introductions in a bit, but we just wanted to take care of a few housekeeping introductory slides first. This presentation is available as part of a cooperative agreement with SAMHSA. Everything that you will hear today, all of the documents are a part of the public domain, so you will have access to them. So no worries regarding having access to the information. It's all public and available to you all. Next slide. If for any reason there is a security issue during this presentation, the session will close immediately and each of you will be asked to rejoin using a separate link. Next slide. We'd like to acknowledge our wonderful partners, our wonderful INTAC partners. They are all listed here, and they are the partners that make all of this work possible. And we thank all of them. Next slide. And just wanted to share our vision and services. And basically at INTAC, our goal is to ensure that all children, youth, and families have access to opportunities and resources that will allow them to thrive. And we're speaking specifically about children, youth, and families who are impacted by mental health. And all of our work is focused on this vision. Next slide. Some commonly asked questions. So we just want to share this up front and we'll repeat it again at the end. You will receive a certificate of completion. After this event, you'll get a copy of the presentation as I previously shared, and you will also have access to the recording. Next slide. And another important resource for you all is that we will be offering continuing education hours. So after completion of the evaluation survey that you'll receive at the end of the training, you'll be redirected to complete the CE form, and we're offering up to 2 CE hours for this training. Next slide. Another tremendous resource that our wonderful presenters have put together for you all is a restorative parenting guidebook. And this guidebook includes everything that you'll hear today, plus some extra offline work that you can engage in to sort of build skills in this area. So this is a tremendous resource that will be available to you. And the link is here, and you'll also have access to it afterwards when you download the slides. Next slide. So, without further ado, welcome to today's session, Restorative Parenting for Building, Maintaining, and Healing Our Relationships with Children. Next slide. I am Dion Coker-Apia. I'm an associate professor and psychologist at Georgetown University Medical Center, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Jasmine Boatwright, who is the youth program coordinator at Youth Move National, and we serve as the co-team leads for the Community Wellness and Peer Support Transformation team that is supporting the Training Academy. Next slide. And it is my honor to introduce our presenters for today. I'll start with Dr. Sal Corbin, who is the training coordinator for the Behavioral Health System of Baltimore, who has a wealth of mental health experience and has been doing this work for a number of years. And we're just honored that he agreed to share his expertise with us. And we're equally as excited to welcome Ms. Chardonnay Johnson, who is a residential foster therapist at Bourne Family Services, who also comes with a wealth of experience in this area. And we are just so excited to have them share their experience, their journey, their expertise with you all today. And I am going to stop now so that we can hear from those that you actually came to listen to. So Sal and Chardonnay, I'll turn it over to you. And thanks again for joining us today for this training.
Thanks, Dion. Let me get a thumbs up from somebody. You can hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, it's an honor to be here to share this time and space with you. This workshop actually kind of came about by accident. I work with an organization on the weekends called the DC Peace Team, and the DC Peace Team embraces restorative justice as one of its founding principles and practices. And so in that particular work, we've started to apply it to different issues in our world, in our culture, in our society. And we decided to come up with one for parenting. Um, in terms of this particular workshop, we invited my daughter Chardonnay to come in on it and participate. And we decided to, instead of just talk about restorative practices with parenting, to actually demonstrate what a conversation might sound like. At the time that we first did it, we did not think that it would have an impact. We thought it was kind of maybe the way everybody talked to their kids, but the response that we got was very overwhelmingly positive and supportive, and for some people, even in shock. So we have been developing this workshop ever since, mostly for parents and now for providers. So we just want to acknowledge the entire team that helped us just put this together in a way that is best supporting you and best received by you as well. To give you a little history on Chardonnay and my relationship, we have always been a long distance father and daughter. We have never spent more than 2 weeks in the same space together. And when I say long distance, she's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. And I did not find out that I had a daughter until she was 2. So the first time I met her, she kind of, I was sitting on the couch and her mom brought her in. She bounced across the room and up and kind of halfway into my lap. And she said, "Who are you?" And when I looked down at her, I knew instantly what had just gone down. Like I knew she was mine without having to do the DNA test and all that. It was, instantaneous. I know you've heard of like love at first sight and those kinds of things. I'm a living testimony to it. Like I didn't need any validation or proof. What I didn't know was how to navigate it. What do I do with this, right? I have this daughter that I didn't know that I had, and now I'm 3,000 miles away. How do I develop a relationship with her? And that's where this workshop comes from. What this workshop is not telling you how to raise your kids or how to tell your or inform your families how to raise theirs. What we are offering is possibly an alternative approach to opening up a different kind of conversation that is inclusive with our kids. And this happened because I was challenged by how do I develop an intimate relationship with my child so far away and not being present to practically anything that was happening in her development. And I didn't have any answers. So, I don't claim to be an expert on parenting, but what I did know is in that moment is that that I needed to be brutally honest with her about our situation, about the feelings, about the struggles, about my love for her, that anything short of that would lead to the demise or the destruction of trust in our relationship. And so I just started initiating honest conversations with her. They weren't always comfortable. They weren't always easy. And we had a couple of fallouts in this process. So it was far from being perfect, but it was ideal in terms of offering the restorative space. That means it gave us the space to revisit and redeem and reconcile and move towards each other. So that's basically what you're getting to. We're going to offer some skills and some ideas and techniques. I'll do that first. I'll set us up. Then I'm going to turn it over to Shardy, and she's going to talk about her work with foster youth, which is just amazing. And then we'll demo another conversation for you at the end, and we'll have time for reflection and questions from you if you have them. So having said that, there's your stage. Let's see what we can get into today. So our opening quote is that the best gift we can give our children is to be a non-anxious presence. I say that because parenting is not perfect. And the reason it's not perfect is because we are not perfect human beings. Being human is flawed, and being flawed means we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to get everything right. So as a parent, you want to be as present to everything as you possibly can. And I always wanted an open door, an open window policy with Chardonnay. I never wanted her to be afraid to bring anything up to me. And so that's why I started talking to her about everything. But How we show up for them, whether you like it or not, is modeling how they're going to become. So they're going to adopt a lot of great things from us as parents. There's no doubt about that. But they're also watching the stuff that we don't get right. And when they move into a space of hypocrisy, so usually in their teenage years, where they can determine the things that you're not getting right, or you're saying that they should do, but you're not doing yourself, they will call you out on it. Couple of other quotes. Our children lay wounded on the ground, run over by our high-speed good intentions. I know every parent in this room has good intentions, the best intentions. They want the best for their child, and sometimes they will start laying the groundwork for how that's supposed to occur. And that's wonderful because we want them equipped, we want them safe, we want them secure, we want them successful. The only downside to that is that it doesn't always include their voice. So sometimes we are molding and shaping them to be what we want them to be without their input. And restorative parenting does provide that voice. I was born and raised in a family where it was very authoritarian. The parents said and you did. There was no response. And if you did respond, it was usually met with swift punishment. And so I grew up with what's called a silent voice. My parents intended well, but I didn't learn to speak up for myself. I grew up avoiding conflict. And I grew up thinking that all the successes that I achieved in school and after were stuff that you were just supposed to do, not stuff that you were celebrating, but that's what good kids did. And I thought that this was the way it was and normal for everybody until I started hanging out with other families. And then this last quote from the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer: there is only so much you can teach a child, and ultimately they are who they are. I offer that quote because we try to put so much into the development of our child in this molding and shaping that we do, that we sometimes forget that they are a unique individual with a unique personality and perspective with their own unique goals. Instead of molding them to become doctors and lawyers and whatever else, why don't we mold them into the gifts that they have that they want to pursue? But my parents never had one conversation in my entire life about what are my gifts. So this particular framework allows for that exchange. It also allows for us to acknowledge as parents what we might get wrong and include the child in that conversation about how do we get or move towards getting it right. Okay, just quickly, I want to give the framework for restorative justice, which is where these restorative practices come from. Restorative justice came about as a challenge to our current retributive system, which is all about broken rules, guilt of the perpetrator, harsh and sometimes lifelong punishment, while often the needs of the victim are minimized or ignored. And it's all about making sure that that person is held accountable, but never given an opportunity to redeem themselves. The restorative approach, the restorative justice approach, is all about relationships. It identifies needs, it identifies harms and where that repair needs to occur regarding that harm. It involves all parties, the offender, the perpetrator, the victim, the community. Everybody has a voice at that table, and they're all considered in the punishment. So there is punishment for restorative justice. However, it is determined by the collective community because it is an inclusive model. You don't lock them up and throw away the key. Don't exclude them from society or community. Keep them active in a way that allows them to repair the harm that was done and express that remorse. In terms of practice, this happens one of three ways primarily: restorative justice circles, what we call restorative inquiry, which Chardy and I will demo for you today, as well as what's called victim offender dialogue. And so when I was thinking about this and how do you apply it to parenting, when we build relationships, it's not just the initiation and the maintenance of those relationships, but because we do get things wrong, there's always repair that occurs. Why? Well, I bet you if I were to ask in this room, all 164 of us, have you ever been hurt or harmed by somebody else significant to you? I'm sure all of our hands would go up, every last one of them. And if I were to also ask, well, have you ever hurt somebody that is close to you? Yeah, that all 166 hands should also go up, but they will probably be a little lower. It's easier to talk about when we are hurt versus when we might have done the harm ourselves. And the restorative approach allows for both sides, both perspectives, both conversations. Now, when dealing with our kids, and I can speak to this, I can preach to this particular slide, what we see on the surface is only a fraction of what is going on with them in total. There's a whole bunch of stuff, just I don't even need to read what's underneath the surface down there at the bottom of the slide, but just pick a few of them. All that stuff is going on simultaneously, regardless of what kind of parent you are, regardless if you are doing all these wonderful things for your child and set them up for success, they still have these underlying needs that may or may not be expressed. And I'm not saying that there aren't families that don't allow this type of expression. I think it's wonderful when kids are able to communicate these issues that are under the surface to their parents. But we can all assume that a lot of families don't, right? Even successful families. You'll find that success and achievement and money and credentials has very little to do with how we raise our children. We all kind of make the same mistakes, regardless of those things, right? That's the human factor. Okay. Now, for me and Chardonnay, I didn't want the bottom of that iceberg to be so large. And it wasn't that I needed her to share everything with me. I wanted her to have the space to do it. So in other words, if she ever wanted to share stuff with me, that she felt completely open, comfortable, and safe in doing so. So that's the point behind this entire setup. Now, what are some common mistakes that we make as parents? And I'm sure many of you already know this, and you can communicate some of this stuff to, as providers to the families that you're supporting. Well, we do a lot of blaming. Well, why? Because we are parents and we know more than they do. We know what's best for them, and we know, we have more life experience. So we can talk down to them, whether we intend to or not. So there's a lot of blaming, right? When they don't get things right, that's your fault. We make them feel negatively for the mistakes that they made, when instead mistakes are a part of life. In fact, I think most of you would agree that the mistakes are the things that we learn from the most. They give us context, they give us perspective, they let us know where we don't want to go. But if you raise your children expecting that they will never make mistakes, then I think that they're going to be largely underprepared for the realities of the world, right? And their humanness. Name calling. So you're so stupid. This happens in a lot of abusive families, or a lot of families where the parents, authoritarian families where the parents are always right and could do no wrong. Moralizing. So, that's judgment for the decisions that you made. I mean, think about it. They're your kids. So kids, of course, are going to do stuff that is morally questionable, or maybe not an informed decision. Didn't you coming up? I sure did, right? So it would be very insensitive and hypocritical for me to turn around then and hold Chardonnay accountable for making those same mistakes and uninformed decisions, as opposed to moving alongside her and supporting her in that perspective and how to come back from those choices. Comparisons. So if you have more than one sibling, or sometimes you'll make comparisons with the kid down the street. Well, your sister, she gets A's. Why can't you get A's? Or, Charlie next door, he's been accepted to such and such university. You haven't even started applying. So comparisons only, again, continue to demean and minimize a person's existence. And it's also controlling, if you think about it, right? Sarcasm. Yeah, that was a great job, you idiot. Right? Now, here's the thing. And let's do prophecy as well, number 6. I told you so. When a person has committed a mistake or an error, probably the last thing they need to hear is somebody come along and say, well, I told you so, or kick them when they're already down. Now, are there places and spaces where that needs been heard? Yeah, absolutely. But for the most part, when people already know that they messed up, they don't need you to remind them of it over and over. And as parents, we are really, really good at doing that. Okay. So, what does a restorative parenting conversation kind of sound like? And these might be big pills to swallow, folks. I'm not saying that what I was able to achieve with Shardy was easy. It was a risk, so I risked losing my relationship with her. And I will say, with full transparency, I didn't know the outcome. Like it was a gamble, but I was very blessed and fortunate in that it paid off, and we have the type of relationship that we do now. But here are some of the key ingredients, and these are things that you can pass on to the people that you're supporting, and use them themselves if you want. The first that I've already mentioned is self-awareness and honesty, right? The parent has to model this in order to expect it in return from their child, right? We are really good at telling our kids what to do or what not to do, but not embracing or demonstrating that same behavior ourselves. That is the notion of reciprocity, that second bullet, right? I believe in relationships, all relationships, get what you give. And so if that's what you're putting out there, then that's exactly what's going to come back and slap you in the face. So generally speaking, children will give back to their parents what they have received. Now, there is a model in family systems called avoiding the demon. Sometimes children will embrace the exact opposite of what their parents have demonstrated in order to not repeat that behavior. So if, let's say, a parent was an alcoholic, that child will grow up avoiding alcohol at all costs. There's also what's called the safe return home. And don't be misled by the term safe. That just means we tend to go back on what we know, right? For those of you who have ever tried to avoid something that your parents did that you didn't like, then found yourself doing it one day, it's because it's in your wiring, it's in your conditioning, it's in your modeling, and you default back to what you knew. My parents were very, very swift and harsh with their punishments. We were spanked, and I had to work really hard at not being that type of parent towards Chardonnay, where I allowed her to have a voice. I didn't just grab her or pick her up or switch her bottom. Like, I had to really work hard not to do that because that's all I knew. So I had to create this space of safety for her to have a voice and then not respond to her with such harsh punishment. It's just all that I knew. So this whole thing that I'm demonstrating with you today is kind of what I made up, what I thought would work. And I was just fortunate that it did. Consistency. I know Chardonnay is going to talk about this. This is probably the most important thing that you can do for your child, is to show up for them consistent. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound really backwards, but just hear me out. I would rather you show up consistently bad for your child or consistently good than a mix. When you mix good and bad, you're loving them 1 minute and then hitting them the next or whatever. All that does is create a confused child that has no idea which direction to take. They don't know if they're supposed to move towards you or move away. And the reason I say consistently bad, obviously I wouldn't want that, but a consistently bad parent, that model can be reversed much easier, because all you have to do is start showing them the good side consistently. But a child that gets back and forth, left and right, all over the place, they're just a mess. They're confused. They don't know what to do. So yeah, show up consistently for your child. Probably the best thing you can do for them. Effective communication, and I'll just read it as that definition says it. When the message from the parent,
we went to bed early, and of course,
oh, there we go. Thank you. When the message from the parent is received by the child as the parent intended it. Now, this is a general definition for communication that, notice, we almost never embrace. We're talking all the time, right? But how often in our daily exchanges with anybody are we checking in to see if they received the message the way we meant it? No, we don't. It's not part of our normal exchange. And what happens is people are like, well, we just talked about it. I said it. I told her. And then it doesn't work out because you walked away with different interpretations. Boundaries and consequences. I want to remind everybody that restorative parenting is not about a lack of consequences, or a lack of punishment. I don't like to use the term punishment, but there are consequences, right? And those consequences can be established, understood, and honored better when you have an open space to exchange with the child, when they understand. As long as you are honoring that boundary consistently, the child gets it. You're not going to get all that back talk because they know, right? You've already navigated that. You've already talked about it. You've already agreed on what those boundaries are. And then last but not least, and this is probably the most difficult part, is you got to be humble. And as a parent, that doesn't feel like that should be a necessity because we are the parents, right? What are you humble about what, right? I'm trying to teach them the right thing to do. Humility is what opens that space, folks. It's what allows the child to step into it with a voice that has questions, has feedback, has agreement, has disagreement, and it's still okay. But that means as a parent, you have to be vulnerable. And you have, look, if you are so quick to point out a child's flaws and mistakes, then you ought to be at least willing to listen to what maybe yours are, right? It can't just be one direction. That seems to be a little self-centered and controlling to me. So if you are going to approach your child, and you will hear this question in the demo today, happens to be Chardonnay's favorite one, but basically it's allowing them to give feedback on how you're doing as a parent. Okay. What Shardy and I will do a little bit later is demonstrate a restorative inquiry for you. And basically this is between parent and child, where you have to practice active listening. Active listening is not as easy as you think it is. I see a hand up. Let me just pause there for a minute before I go further. Ashley?
Hi, Sal. There's a question in the chat. This person asked, what's the difference between being humble and pleading/enabling?
Well, I would have to ask what that person means by enabling, because enabling is often used as a term to denote you're assisting the person with their own problem behavior. You're allowing that to happen. My definition of enabling is I'm enabling Chardonnay to have a space with me that allows me to hear her voice, right? To hear her perspective, to hear her commentary, to hear her input in this thing called life, because we're walking it together. So enabling, I'm not sure, but I would need to hear from that person specifically what they mean by that. But for me, we're opening up the space actually to communicate all these things much more clear, these boundaries, your love for the person, what happens when things go wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a great question. And if I'm hearing this question right, I think this is about the practical delivery of it, right? Sometimes we can think we're being humble, but we're actually, the message that we're communicating is that, hey, it's okay, or whatever, or it doesn't matter. And none of that is true in restorative parenting. But if by the question you mean this is all about how you show up and how you say it, not what you're saying, how you show up and how you're saying, then I'm in full agreement. If that didn't capture it, then yeah, just let me know.
Okay, thanks, Sal.
Thank you. So in this inquiry, and this inquiry can be done with any two individuals. This is just between parent and child. You're fully and actively listening to the child, and they're fully and actively listening to you. That's something they're probably already used to, right? We're not as used to listening to them as they are to us. But here's the thing: active listening, folks, is not as easy as you think. And I train this stuff for a living, but let me tell you, active listening is not easy, because when you're listening to somebody, it means you are quiet. You are silent. You're not jumping in there with a whole bunch of questions or redirects or comments or feedback. You are allowing the person to fully express themselves. And when they finish, you ask them, was there anything more you wanted to share? So it can be grueling because we don't like silence. We always got something to say. I'm the worst at. I'll cut you off a bit. It's one of my worst communication habits. And so when I'm actively listening to somebody, I'm always reminding myself, okay, just like be cool, don't say anything, just let them finish, let them finish. And when I cut people off, guess what? half the time when they finish someplace different than what I thought they were going. So if I were just allow them to finish, I would have gotten the full message. So anyways, and also be gentle with yourselves. Whatever you adopt or that you support your families in terms of their adoption of any of this, it's a process. Like, we don't all take workshops and then come out masters of it, right? It takes what? Practice. And practice means sometimes you'll get things wrong, sometimes you get them right, but you can learn from that process and get it better, tweak it as you go. Okay. So tips for good listening. Well, I think we kind of already talked about how you show up is very, very important. Part of that humility is that you're relaxed and calm, right? That you're not coming at them aggressively, assertively, or talking down to them. But the inquiry to the right on this slide is really what the restorative practice questions address. And that is, okay, what happened? What harm occurred? In the demo today, Chardonnay has absolutely no idea what I'm going to ask her. And so it's unscripted. But I guarantee you will not be all the good times that we had or what's going on right in our relationship. It will be visiting things that were potentially harmful for her. And I have to stay in that space and receive what she says back. And I have no idea what that is. So that could be great. It could be tragic. It could be triggering, all of those things. But humble inquiry means that I honestly say, okay, what happened? Tell me about it. And how did that affect you? What do you need? So what are the needs that come from that harm? And then what can we do to move towards healing? Now notice, this is not counseling, and we're not solving the problem in the moment. What can we do to move towards healing? So what is it that you need, and what can we do? What kind of resources are available to us to make that happen? Okay. And then you also acknowledge the child as a full person, right, in that exchange. Okay. All right. I'm going to pause there and just ask if there's any questions or comments, because now I'm going to do is turn it over to Chardonnay. But before we do, I want to just let everybody breathe for a minute. If we need to, run and get some coffee or water, please do that. Take a couple minutes, stand up, stretch. And please, if there's anything that's immediate that I can answer, please feel free to ask that now.
And as a reminder, folks can use the raise hand function in order to for us to see if you have a question or comment.
Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm a parent leader and a mentor and a parent, right? And I have children from the age of 15 all the way to 30, 3 of them. And so my question is, at this moment, I have a couple, but I'll just keep it to this one. How do you remove yourself from the feelings of frustration as a parent of not being heard? When you're hearing your child or you're hearing your adult child, you understand what they're saying. You're trying to relate that you understand what they're saying. But then now, here it is, you're done with that conversation. You've ended in not such a great place. And you're in that feeling of frustration. And you want to do this restorative practice, but you just probably not in the space to be able to do that. You're either angry or just frustrated. How do you remove yourself from that space to get back to the space where you can offer this type of restorative parenting?
I think it's an outstanding question. Thank you, Carolyn, for asking it. And Carolyn, I think you're speaking to the human factor. The wonderful thing about the restorative process is that it goes on as long as is needed. So it's not a one-time session thing or a two-time session thing. In fact, it requires repeated sessions. And yes, you're exactly right, Carolyn. Sometimes you're not going to come out of this feeling great. And why? Well, because I don't know where it was written anywhere that our conversations were always supposed to end great and nice, and we're hitting home runs and singing "We Are the World" and joining hands. Some of the stuff's going to be frustrating, right? Especially when you're visiting repetitive problem issues, right? But what it does do is it establishes the consistency for openness, the consistency of continuing the conversation, right? After this 2 hours, we will reach what I call temporary closure on this topic, temporary, which means that the conversation can continue anytime after it, initiated by anyone. So it's not the end of it. So yeah, are you going to have frustrations? Yeah, you're going to have some bad feelings. Whenever we're visiting hard topics, it is uncomfortable. But hopefully, if you do it consistently, it sends a message to the child that it is okay. Now, look, as much as I love for Chardonnay to shower me with affirmation and things that I got right, I also have to be willing to sit in the moments of things that I got wrong and either just own it or work through it or navigate that with her. That's part of the process. And here's the thing, conflict is inevitable. And probably the greatest source of it is from loved ones, family, right? Conflict is going to happen. It's not that it happens, it's what you do with it. Because healthy conflict resolution actually brings people closer. It builds intimacy, it moves people towards each other. But what happens is when we're trying to resolve stuff, we act out in so many destructive, unhealthy, or harmful ways that we end up doing more damage than good instead of enrolling that other person in this recovery process. What can we do here? How can we change this? What can I do different or better? You're going to hear me repeat that in the demo today. So thank you for asking that, Carolyn, but it's very much a human experience. But you got to keep showing up. That's the bottom line. You can't just give up because it doesn't feel good one time. Keep showing up, keep sharing, stay open, stay humble. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sal just wanted to share, there are lots of comments in the chat. People are saying thank you for your transparency and really appreciating all that you're sharing. So just wanted to let you know that's also in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate that. We'll hear from Chardonnay if any of that stuff worked. But but I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is I really always wanted to be in. I couldn't talk to my parents about anything. Let me tell you, the first conversation my dad had with my brother and I about safe sex was spontaneously at a dinner, like we were just eating our food, and my dad said, "You boys should wear condoms." Just like that. And my brother was 3 years my elder, so he was 19 and I was 16. So you know how young kids are when they're at first. And I was thinking, well, I probably could have used that talk maybe over a year ago. But I mean, the point is that we would never initiate that conversation with him for fear of judgment, fear of consequence, punishment, all of that stuff. So I never wanted to have that type of relationship with Charlotte. I wanted her to be able to come and share with me the things that she thought that were unfair or didn't feel good or whatever. Yeah, one more, Ashley.
One more. So Sal, a lot of the folks in the room who are registered today are peer support specialists.
Yeah.
They, have caseloads, they work with families on a day-to-day basis. Do you have any tips for them on how they can talk about some of these skills and things that you've talked about with the families that they work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I would start with an open conversation about how they perceive their relationship with their child, how the parenting is going. I would also not judge them for where they are or aren't. I would meet them right where they're at, gain their perspective, identify what their perception of the needs of the child are, and then you start walking with them, start processing with them. Don't direct them, just allow them to come into that space and start talking through things. Even maybe use a couple personal examples when you're doing it. Because peer recovery to me is one of the most powerful allies in recovery, right? And guidance. So yeah, absolutely. Start with the conversation, keep it open, walk beside the person, not in front of them, trying to lead them on the right path, because there is no right path when it comes to parenting. And let me just be real, y'all. You can do everything right as a parent and your child can still deviate, right? There's no guarantee for that. Now, you hope for that, you pray for it, you do all the things that you can to put those things in place. But yeah, that's where that initial quote or the third quote I gave you at the beginning of the session was all about, right? Ultimately, they are who they are and they're going to make their own choices. And how do you navigate that space when they make choices that are different from yours? Ari, and then I got to turn it over to Charlotte.
Yeah, just a really quick question. I work in a high school and I try to present to parents, and I see that some parents are very hesitant to change the way they talk to their kids. or even can be very defensive and say, well, you know, I know how to talk to my kid. Don't give me advice or any of that. So I was wondering if you have any tips for just how to maybe initiate those conversations to create more openness for parents who might be more resistant to trying to change the way they talk to their kids.
Yeah, if you're having, thank you for that question, and I hope I'm saying it, Ari. I'm sorry,
Oh, Ari.
Ari. Thank you, Ari. Yeah. So my approach would be one of openness, curiosity, genuine curiosity, not false curiosity, right? And hey, what's working for you? What's not, right? As opposed to, let's find out what's right or wrong with what you're doing. I'm not here to tell anybody how to speak to their kids. If this model works for you, then by all means use it and enlist my support in that implementation. But this is an option. It's an alternative. It's another way to reach your children. But I first would start with, hey, what's working for you? I mean, they, first of all, they are the parents. So they have first and legal right to how they raise their kids. So I'm not trying to change that. But secondly, I always move towards people with affirmation first. Let's talk about what's working in your world and what's great about your kids and what's good about you as a parent before we open up to alternatives, right? But you gotta be open to that space and them not necessarily agreement. But whenever we're talking about children, everybody's got to say, parents, the teachers, the school administrators, the policymakers, everybody, the churches, everybody's got something to say, and it's a mess. So yeah, it is difficult, and I really applaud you, Ari, for doing that work and staying in that fight. So okay. Without further ado, let me introduce my daughter, Chardonnay, who's going to talk to you about the work that she does with foster youth. And let me just say, for the record, I speak about this stuff kind of theoretically and certainly from a restorative practice perspective, but Chard is doing the work. I'm not working with kids or their families. And the ones that do come to this workshop usually are parents, at least for the public offerings. So it's the work that you're doing, and here are the folks that are here in the audience, and the work that Chardonnay is doing is above me, and I'm just in awe of it and very appreciative and grateful. So Chardonnay.
Oh, thanks, Dad. That was very, very kind of you. Um, and thanks for the questions too. I think it's really important. I know this is a very difficult field to be in, and we want these families to be successful, and it is really hard to get them where they need to be. But I think with the things that we've been talking about, you really can see some change. Um, I've been working in foster care for the last 15 years, preparing and restoring families. And a lot of what I see helpful for them is kind of holding that mirror up to them and allowing them to learn how to hear themselves, see themselves, and like approach conflict with the knowledge of what their body's doing, what their language is saying, and tone. So it sounds very simple, but as you pointed out, Ari, these parents see that there's a conflict or that there's something they want to change, but aren't necessarily willing to make changes for it. You kind of have to let them keep stumbling and falling and get to a place of like, well, what I have tried isn't working, so I'm willing to try something new. Um, it's not always so easy. Allowing somebody to feel heard and seen and understood is sometimes like the greatest gift you could ever give them. That's where we build our empathy, and it takes a lot for someone on a high pedestal like we put our parents on to really come down off that, meet your child where you're at physically, spiritually, and emotionally, so that you can help them ground and find that center. And through that, you understand your hurt and pain through a different lens. And just kind of with the quote that I was saying, without understanding how our feelings and thoughts and behaviors work together, it's just impossible to find ourselves and get back to that. If we don't always understand our emotions, but they do shape our thoughts and decisions. And when you hit this disconnect, it really is because you too are not connected with yourself and what's most important. And again, with these parents, it is a lot of I need to fix the child. It's never something that they want to self-reflect on. I think that is one of the just biggest challenges I have also found. I mean, there's no magic wand to fixing these things. It really does take, like my dad said, walking alongside them and modeling that. And yeah, it's a very difficult pushback. But let me back it up a little. I ended up in foster care, working with foster care youth, because as my dad said, we grew up on separate sides of the coast. My mother and father grew up together, but always maintained a relationship when my dad would come back and forth between the East and West Coast. And I always watched them have a very loving and friendly and playful relationship with each other. So as a child, I never really understood why they weren't together. It just never made any sense for me. But my mother found herself in some very abusive relationships, and was just very heavily into substance use. So early on, about fourth grade, I made a very bold decision after coming home from school one day that I did not want to go home anymore. It wasn't safe enough for me. And at 8 years old, I'm still baffled that I could make a decision like that so early. I ran to my family, my aunt's home, and I basically hunkered down and said, "I'm not going home. Are you ready to take care of me?" And it really shifted a lot for me, especially at that age. My grades dropped. I just didn't have a place of safety, didn't know who to look to. And working with foster care youth, the biggest thing we see with them is runaways. It goes right back to your trauma that you get built. You're gonna run, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so I got just really, really curious about trying to help youth that have these.
You're muted.
I wonder how that happened. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Can we get to the next slide, Dad? So kind of what I'm leaning into is a lot of work that I do with the families is through attachment work, through trauma, resilience, and it all just goes back to that. If you're not aware of your traumas, if you're not aware how they come up for you in your day-to-day conflicts, they're going to spill out in your relationships. And at a very, very early age, like I said, you build those trauma responses through your senses, through your smells and your sights and these triggers and these unsafe environments that you're in. You learn them so early on that it sticks with you for the rest of your life. I think this is what makes it very complicated for parents. They don't understand that this is something they've been doing for years, and that is a really hard thing to break. You have to be able to self-monitor, self-reflect, and yeah, if you don't, then you kind of do fall into these spaces of self-loathing, of self-blame, self-guilt. Even when I ran away, I always looked at myself as the problem child. I was screwing everybody's life up. I really felt like a burden to everybody in my life. And it pushed me into this place of never really like having a sense of belonging, and really brought out these fawn trauma responses where I really wanted to people please. I just wanted to make everybody around me happy, and solve everybody's problems, which is also really emotionally draining. But I do feel like had my dad been closer to me on the West Coast to walk alongside me in those very triggering moments, to model for me what it's like to calm down, to be curious about what you're feeling, to not be shamed or blamed for these things, then I could have did some early rewiring a lot sooner. That's for sure. But this is where decisions are made and behavior is initiated. And I do want everybody to at least reflect on the fact that behavior really is a language. When we're seeing these kids act out and throw toys or become explosive, it's because they don't have the words to express what they're truly feeling on the inside. We have to build their emotional vocabulary so they can even know what it's like to explain what they're feeling on the inside. And sometimes we don't always agree with the behavior, is true, but I think it's really helpful to look through things with a trauma-informed lens. And like my dad said, look beneath what are the underlying needs of this behavior. What are they seeking out of this? Do they need safety? Do they need to be heard? Yeah, those things are really, really important. And just with this too, if I call it like self-repair, if you're not able to self-repair and baby yourself and put yourself back into this safe space, you're never going to be able to do it with your clientele or your child. And that sometimes means babying yourself and coddling yourself a bit and saying, you know what, I am human and I'm allowed to make mistakes and I'm still a great parent despite some of my responses. Go ahead, Dad, change the slide. So I bring up the four horsemen, and kind of like what I was saying with the let me back it up. Trauma is, like I said before, senses are where our trauma is formed. Since that's such an early on thing, it's the same way we repair it. If we're sitting and regulating our senses, that's the way you kind of work against these trauma triggers and these trauma responses. You go back to the basics of grounding. You go back to being in quiet, meditating, like feeding yourself what does feel good. Like it seems very simple, but it's those small practices that help you rewire your brain. I bring up the four horsemen because this is John and Julie Gottman, great, amazing couple that have done tons of research on couples counseling. And they came up with this four horsemen theory. And basically, these are the four leading ways that families break apart, go to divorce. Very similar to what my dad was bringing up earlier. And it doesn't work just for couples, right? This works for all of us. If you're leading into a lot of these left side columns of criticism and contempt, you are more than likely to never find a repair or get out of that and find any success. So how many of us have ever been overly critical towards our loved ones or our clients? It does often start with you and leads towards judgment and rejection. It's so much easier to, when you're frustrated with that, focus on the child and make them the problem. With your contempt, it's intention to insult or verbally abuse. A lot of it's crazy to me. I'd say a lot of parents get down to their child's level in the worst way, and they too tantrum and they too, pout and stump and begin to use sarcasm and eye roll with their own kids. And it's how much you're gonna get out of that? It is all learned behavior. And we get very defensive about our parenting styles. And if you're on defense mode, there's no way you're going to be open and receptive to what's coming. And like my dad said, it's a two-way street. If you're in defense mode, there's no way there's anything getting in on it. And stonewalling is probably like my favorite because this is like once you've made your way through all of these, after you've cussed each other out and judged each other and became defensive, now you want to isolate and walk away. So you get into your body language, you shut down and walk away and wait for the problem to solve itself, which usually it only boils up and boils over more. And on the anecdote side of that, to move out of that stonewalling, you kind of also have to move physically in your body. Let's go on a walk together while we have this conversation versus sitting in this, dark room or like heated kitchen. Like the environment makes a difference and your body needs to move in order to get into a safe place to express those emotions. Same with the gentle startup, if you're going into a very complicated conflict conversation, start with a compliment sandwich. Just go with those strengths. Usually, even with strengths, it's really hard for families to acknowledge where they're at, with some of the good things. But after you can acknowledge that, then you can kind of start to see where there's room for the challenges. Like, yeah. And so leading into your strengths and then you can move into your conflict, whatever needs to happen, but also following back up with how do we repair it? How do we move forward? Yeah.
I just wanted to also say really quickly that you're getting some really great feedback in the chat. People are appreciating what you're sharing in the graphic. So just wanted to send you some positive energy.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, guys. And feel free to ask any questions that you have. I am kind of just going full speed with you, but yes, thank you.
This might be a good time for some questions, right? So
yeah. Anybody has any?
Okay, just a reminder to folks, you can use the raise hand feature if you have any questions for Shar. Okay, you have some questions, Chardonnay. Paula?
Good morning. I just have a question. I work for a tribal program, and a lot of the grandparents are the ones that get the kids. So I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to, and I know that you work for foster care, so that kind of fits into what I'm saying. But I also have grandkids that I help raise, unfortunately. So how does this roll? I mean, I didn't do so well with my kids. As far as being a teen mom, raising one at 15. So this is all really good information, but now I'm working in a tribal environment and I'm non-tribal. So there's that barrier. And then how do I help my grandchildren break the stigma of what I started back when I was 15?
Right. And the tribal culture that is really hard to support that. Yeah, I'm thinking like, yeah, so maybe just really helping to learn more about the culture for sure. I think it puts you in that place of humility, like my dad was saying. You have to kind of humble yourself. I think being honest about what has happened to you, and what you grew up around. I think those are really hard conversations to have with kids. And a lot of the times we think they're not able to handle that information. A lot of the things that helped me with my dad was he would create that space to be able to do that. And it almost empowered me. It gives you a huge empowering. I'm not talking down to you. You're a kid. You can handle this. I'm not hiding things from you. I think we do that a lot with kids too. So it's just being honest about how you were treated so that they can possibly understand some of your responses to them in those really escalated, damaging moments. Being honest with yourself and having that self-reflection about how has the ways that I was brought and taught impacting me in my daily decision making, impacting me in my daily responses. Same with what I was saying before. It took me a while to even realize that I'm in this like people pleasing mode. I had no idea that could come from that far away and that back. So really having to be honest with yourself and hold that mirror up and be like, okay, I'm ready to work on this. It helps you catch those patterns more. And with the kids, hopefully that opens them up into a space of wanting to learn more about their family, about their culture of the family, and just trying to learn how to do it a different way. But yeah, I hope that answers them for you. Dad, do you have anything to add to that?
well, I think you hit on some. First of all, we have to learn about cultures that are different from us, right? We don't know every possible nuance. So, Paula, you being immersed in that, um, don't be bashful to ask, right? Like especially about the things that you don't understand, because it's not just about our wonderful intervention and support, but also how that jives with the cultural norms that exist. So that's a conversation that needs to be had with possibly the elders of the tribe or the parents or whoever that you can access, the gatekeepers. Um, and yeah, and then as Shardy said, being kind of upfront and honest with yourself first, and then with your grandchildren differently. I mean, the way I look at grandkids, it's a second chance. It's another opportunity for things different or better, right? And so it sounds like you're very aware of those things. So yeah, just stay on the path you drop, but be persistent and be consistent. Let's go to Sharmika. Thank you, Paula, for asking that.
Thank you. I'm Shamika Williams. I'm a parent leader at my local partnership. Um, my biggest thing is I'm a people pleaser, and I connected with what you were saying, and then it's more so that I take others' problems and I traumatize myself with them. So I'm trying to figure out how I can help them, how I can help them, move forward, how I can help them find resources, how I can help them do this and that. And it seems like I take that on because when I was in their position, I was doing it by myself. So I end
Mm-hmm.
up taking that, and it's like, I don't want anybody to feel like that. So I go over and beyond, and then I become like devastated, like in a sense, when I see them not taking those opportunities or using those resources or utilizing the things that can help their children, because I work with parents of special needs children, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's mental health, behavior, or medical frailness. So
Mm-hmm.
I find myself taking that on, and it's like I have to do more. I have to do more. I have to do more. I have to find this. They said they needed that. Let me go find it. And then when I find it, and I'm like, hey, well, how did that resource work out? Oh, it was too far away. I didn't do it. And then I found myself like in that situation of like, well,
Yeah.
were you ready for the help? And that's why I found myself kind of feeling like I have
Yep.
to ask, are they
Yeah.
ready to receive it? And how do I channel that and just leave it as I've given the information. They can only do, I can only do that part. I don't
Yes.
know how to keep that line and appreciate that and stuff, because I don't want them to feel like, hey, well, I don't want to ask her for anything if she gonna throw it up in my face and stuff like that. And I try not to even ask about the resource
Mm-hmm.
because I know my face can tell it. So
Mm-hmm.
I just try not to, do that and stuff, because I I see we have so many resources. They're not advertised. They're not known to parents. So then
Right.
I try to go to all of these committees, find, groups and stuff like that, so I can take these webinars. I'm like, there's Zooms. Just put them in your ear pod. You can listen to them, while you work and stuff like that. But it's great information. But I just
Yeah.
don't know how to take myself back.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And that comes up all the time. I drove myself nearly insane trying to save the world. Like, of course, we want to heal and solve all the problems for everybody. You can have all the answers to it, but that does not mean people are ready to take it, are ready to do it. I said this earlier, you really do have to meet people where they're at and leave it there. You can do all of that research for them and leave it there. And you have to leave it knowing that we have to look at our work as a seed planted, right? Not necessarily solving the whole thing and having a fully grown, beautiful plant here. It really is about planting the seeds and watering it over and over. There's no quick fix. It's not as, even if you could draw the line for them from point A to point B, it is really hard if, like you said, they're not ready to be there yet. So I hear you. It is struggles. That's how you have to kind of build some positive self boundaries for yourself. Realize how much you're pouring into others. Typically, when we do this, it's because we're avoiding our own problems. It's so much easier to solve everybody else's problems than our own. So I would encourage you to do more self-reflecting, more self-repair, more self-care. Dive into those deep parts of yourself, those shadow work areas, because typically those are the places we don't want to look at and how we busy ourselves with other people's. But It is really hard. It's hard to watch people you love and care about struggle, and especially if you have all the answers. Um, yeah, and therapy is the same way. I just feel like people are scared to go into those spaces because it pushes you to have to reflect on those things. It's not always a quick fix. But I do appreciate that the work that you do, and I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Shar. We're
Same
gonna take
thing.
one. We're gonna take one more question. And Shamika, um, your ability to support others, it has everything to do with how you're taking care of yourself. So you can't expect others to go through the things that they need to better their lives without our willingness to do that for ourselves. So Charlie's right on point. A lot of self-reflection, self-awareness, self-care that probably needs to take place with you first. In peace work, we call that getting ourselves right before we try to right the world, right? So
Right.
anyway, yeah, thank you so
Right.
much, Shamika. And last but not least, before we move on, Tandra.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, to both you and Chardonnay for even coming into this space and sharing what you guys are sharing. It is so very needful, and I'm a firm believer in a lot of times we give people we give them the beginning of where trauma is, how it started. We give them the end, what it looks like when we recovered, but we don't often see what the in between is like. And that is really where the struggle is. What does recovering, what does the healing process actually look like? Is it okay for me to feel these feelings, to think these thoughts? Is it okay for me to, express myself in this manner? Am I doing this properly? Am I actually, making progress? How do I measure that? These are the things that is oftentimes missed, and why peer work is so very vital. So I commend you guys on being in this space. And I just wanted to share one of the things that I do. I am a certified peer support specialist. I've been doing peer work since age 17. So I've been doing it for a little over 30 years now. And a lot of what I have done, even as a grandmother, I oftentimes would, in order to have hard conversations, to create a safe space, is taking them out of what's familiar. If being at home is a trauma place for them, taking them out of that space to where you're creating a new safe space where they're not reflecting on, well, in these walls, when I said certain things, I got in trouble, or certain things happened in these walls. So you kind of remove them from the place of trauma to create a safe space to actually have those kind of conversations. A lot of times, once a month, as a mom, I would take my girls out to a hotel. So they look forward to this hotel stay, even though we tackled very hard conversations. I brought in games to lighten the subjects that we were going to tackle, but also to give them free course that sparked up a conversation that was less intimidating. So, a lot of times it works better. And even with my grandchildren, a lot of times I have to do that. I take them out of the apartment where they're experiencing stress because mom's yelling and fussing, or not happy with their behavior. And we go on a car ride, we put the music on, jam to music, and then we talk. We're having conversation, or we do pillow talk at nighttime before they go to bed. We video chat and we do pillow talk about their day, what happened in their day, what didn't go right, what did go right, and offer them options on how to better do a situation or a thing that didn't work out, so well for them, and appropriating big emotions, equating big emotions to big situations and small emotions to small situations, and learning how to differentiate those. And I had to do that with the children as well as with the adults. So just wanted to offer that, as well as some options to work with, and even with to Miss Paula.
Hello, Tandra. I would like to thank you so much. Sorry.
Ashley, you're
Hello?
muted.
Yeah.
There you are.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank Tandra for her comment, and Tandra, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, and we want to be mindful of our time and
Oh,
move
my
on to the
apologies. My
presentation.
apologies.
No
My
problem,
apologies.
Tandra. Thank you so much for your input. We
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you,
so much.
Chandra.
Yeah. You brought up some really, really great points, and I am going to touch on those as well. And you're absolutely right. We're in our safe spaces at home, but you're right, those safe spaces can equally become triggering environments. And to break up some of those challenges, try something new. It's always about trying something new, repairing and making new meaning and new memories to trample out all of those negative ones. So a lot of the stuff that you're doing is very on point. I could hear that you're an amazing parent and an even better service worker. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing what you shared. I'll
So
hop back in. Go ahead, Dad.
we're gonna move into our demo, but I think you had one more, slide. Did you want
Yeah,
to speak to
yeah,
that?
yeah. So this kind of just moves into kind suggestions, which you brought up a lot of. And for me, I tell this to the parents all the time, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. You cannot preach and teach all these things if you don't come from a safe space of already being heard and being cared for and meeting those basic needs. Um, and again, even with your patterns, identity, environment, I use this as well. It's PI. You have to be able to self-reflect on some of your own patterns. You have to be able to monitor yourself and be self-aware and observant so you can learn how to break the cycles, develop that healthy self-awareness. And with identity, I try to remind parents that you are not your behaviors. Your identity is not your behaviors. Your identity is who you are. Your mother, your parent. But because I yelled at my kid doesn't make me a bad parent. It makes it a bad behavior. So just kind of keeping the two separate. And that kind of goes into the self-repair piece too. Being able to take a step back, say, gosh, I really feel bad for blowing up on my child right now. Let me take some accountability in that. Let me forgive myself. Let me repair here first and regulate so that I can go then back into the room and have a different conversation and a different outcome. And I can sit there and say, gosh, I really didn't need to respond that way. And I'm sorry if that scared you, or I'm sorry if that made you feel some kind of way. You're showing your humility, you're taking accountability, and then moving into the space of, well, what I really wanted to express to you is, X, Y, and Z wasn't safe. And how do we move into a place of being safer? Yeah. So I try to work with parents a lot on that. And again, what you said, Chandra, environment is everything. Sometimes literally going outside to change the environment, get some fresh air, go for a walk, drive, listen to music, literally changes the entire conversation. I don't know how many sessions I've had in the car where kids are just like, it's a very soothing thing. So are the swings. It all goes back to those early senses that we build as babies. And those same very techniques work just as easily in those situations, believe it or not. Touching on self-repair and forgiveness. Forgiveness is huge. You have to forgive yourself before you can give others. And you're modeling that for your child. You're modeling that as a service worker to these parents and saying, it's okay. I am human. I make mistakes and I'm learning from this and I'm trying to do better. Another great thing is PACE. This is a Dan Hughes theory, but playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. If you are not coming from a place of play, games, your kid loves video games and you hate it, I'm sorry, but spend some time doing that with them. It really bonds you. It connects you. It allows them to feel like you're curious enough about what their world is and what makes them tick. I tell adults all the time to stay playful and play as much as possible. Wake up that inner kid so you can connect with your kid. Acceptance, of course, is accepting where they're at, meeting them where they're at. Curiosity, you have to, I always say, be curious, not furious with parents. Even if you're mad in those moments, asking questions usually helps you to lead to more understanding of what is happening. And like my dad said earlier, not cutting them off to actually hear what they're saying so that you can learn something and get to a different place.
Well, thankfully, as a father, I'm not playful at all. It's all serious.
He is the
Just
biggest
thought I
dad
would
I've ever
share that.
met. I'm pretty sure I'm the adult here, and you're the you're you act up
Did you
crazy.
just say that to every? Wow. Okay.
I
All
can't take
right.
you anywhere in public.
Please continue. Please continue.
But meme making is something that I think me and my dad, it helped us a lot in our journey. Um, if you're not creating new meaningful moments, new memories to replace all those bad ones, you will stay stuck in the past. You won't be able to move towards a better future. Um, yeah, I think that has been the most powerful thing for us. We've committed to, instead of seeing each other once a year, we're going to try 3 times a year. Talking on the phone more, writing letters, whatever it's going to take for us to be able to connect more. Um, that really creates a new culture within our family. That's helps breaks a lot of those generational trauma cycles. New meme making. I mean, that's also a Brene Brown thing too. But language is our portal to meme making, connection, and healing. When we don't have the language to talk about what we're experiencing, it really keeps us severely limited. And I just want to encourage you guys to try out some of these things. Ask me any questions that you may have about it. I know we have to move into this thing. So thank you
Yeah.
guys for hearing me out and letting me share some of my experience.
And thanks, Shardy. And just to everybody that's in the room, for those of you who have more practical questions in terms of being a provider or supporter, the guidebook that is within this presentation has some really wonderful questions that the team helped us develop that will support you in how to initiate some of this with the people that you're working with. So if we don't have time and space to answer it here and now, you can check with the guidebook and certainly keep in touch with us after. So Shardy and I will speak for maybe 10 minutes max, and then we'll have a time for everybody to reflect. And again, this is an unscripted conversation, so Shardy doesn't know what I'm going to throw at her. But this will be an example of a restorative conversation. I'll give you context for it, and that is most of our journey has been fairly pleasant. There have been a few hiccups, one of which was the fact that from about the age of roughly 9 or 10 to 13 or 14, our relationship was almost non-existent, not much contact or communication at all. Most of that had to do with the fact that Shardy was went through custody changes with from her mom to her aunt, and I didn't want to be in the middle or the mess of any of that. But it also further distanced us, so much so that we had to reconnect during her early teen years, probably 9th, 10th grade, something like that. In any case, when we reconnected, it was awkward at first, but it actually clicked. We kind of picked up where we left off, and it was a really kind of venting, cathartic, and joyful experience. However, there was one breakdown, and I'd like to start our conversation with that, Shardy. And so the that reunion began with kind of reconnecting, relaxing, kind of reestablishing our bond. And then we had a really hard conversation because you basically called me out for letting you disconnect for all those years and not coming after you, not coming to look for you. And I remember you saying, so kind of, I'm making up the words, I don't remember them exactly, but so kind of like, so you're just going to let me just, be lost and not come looking for me. And I remember I had two feelings when you said that. One was just all of the guilt and all of the, oh my gosh, well, I really messed that one up. And of course your child wants you to come look for them. And, I can't make up that time. It's too late. I also had another feeling, which was, yeah, but you're 3,000 miles away in the state of California. And if you want to be lost, not much I could do to find you. You could disappear so many different places and that I could never, it'll be an impossible task. And so part of me was kind of mad, like, yeah, okay, I'll find you if you leave some breadcrumbs. But if you're not leaving any breadcrumbs, I wouldn't even know where to start. Anyways, that's something we never talked about, but I wanted to share what that experience was like, what that was like for me first. And just for the audience, we quickly reconciled that. We were back best buddies the next day, but that was a tense moment that we both just kind of walked from. Shardy, what was that experience like for you?
Terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I felt very thrown away. I felt like, how could we connect and get into such a great place for you to just kind of walk away and leave it all behind. And yeah, I think at that age, it was really hard to conceptualize distance as such a huge factor. Because for me as a kid, you as a parent need to move hell high in water to get to me. I didn't care if it broke you to get there. Like that's how I would want my parent to fight for me. That's how I want my partner to fight for me. So when you don't get that love directly from your parents, it does send this huge rejection signal. It does leave you to just question your own worth. But yeah, I think it was you're right. We repaired back from that pretty easily. I think for me, it was like as long as I could get it out and almost yell at you about it, we didn't have to
Yeah.
talk about it again.
Yeah, I felt that. Felt that.
Yeah.
You know,
And you allowed that space. So thank you.
yeah, and, you know, and full transparency, it was definitely a self-centered thing on my part because of the mess that was happening over there on the West Coast. I didn't
Right.
want to have any of it. I didn't want to get involved in it, and I didn't want to compromise my sanity, nor did I want to take sides with members of your
Right.
family over there. So I
Right.
remember kind of feeling it was definitely self-centered there. There's no doubt about that. But I also kind of felt like, hey, this isn't not my
I
place
wish
to,
you.
because I knew that you weren't going to come stay with me on the East Coast. I didn't see that as a likely possibility. So to get into the navigation of who you ended with up there, over there,
Mhm.
was just beyond me. And but in the in the interim, I lost contact with you, and it was terrible.
I think that always bothered me too. I think I always wondered that and never asked until you said that now. But like, I think I too was like, why won't he come rescue me? Why won't he come save me? Why couldn't I come live on the East Coast? Why was that never offered? But I could see the difficult space you are in with all my loved ones already fighting over me. How do you even begin to navigate some of that? But um, yeah, was that ever something you wanted to do or something you thought about?
Oh yeah, every day. And not only thinking about it, but being asked about it. Like, have you spoken to Chardonnay? Have you heard from her? Those kinds of things. And then the guilt of knowing that I hadn't taken initiative to do that, right? Like I'd let it be.
Yeah.
And so, but I did have confidence and faith that we would reunite, not only by my own kind of intuition, but also people around me. They're like, yeah, she's going to come seek you out, and there's going to be some type of they didn't say it was going to be a kind reunion, but there's going to be a reunion, right? And
Yeah.
so and especially hearing that from adult females, women that were in my life, I trusted that. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I trusted it. Um, do you remember? Okay, never talked about this. Not in detail. Do you remember your first boyfriend that you went on a ski trip with?
Yeah, why do you remember that?
Oh, I remember it because I remember specifically you lying to your family over there about where you were going for the weekend. But I remember you telling me what you were going to do, and which was evident of the open space that we had created with each other. I knew
Yeah.
what you were going to do, but I didn't want to guilt you like, oh, good girls don't do bad things, and you're going to be up there
Yeah.
with your boyfriend. And I remember having a conversation with you about safety, right? Safe sex, safe love, your boyfriend and how he treats you and those kinds of things. And I remember you listened to all of that and you were cool. And when you came back from that trip, you never said anything about it. It was like a month later. And this is the only thing you said. So finally, I brought it up and I was like, oh, did you have a good time on your weekend getaway? And you said, oh, yeah, we did this, we did that. Uh, skiing, the whole thing. Oh, just told me the whole thing. And then at the very end, this is what you said. You said, and we were safe. And I just, like on the inside, I just beamed like, that. I mean, that's all I wanted, right? Not don't have
Yeah.
sex or don't have,
Yeah.
just be safe, whatever you do. But I
Yeah.
remember that being like a breakthrough moment for us. Do you remember that?
That's hilarious. I do not remember telling you that. I tell you too much. And you do create such a safe space for me. I'm just like spilling over information without it even thinking about the damage. But that is hilarious. I definitely thought I was grown at 16, 17. And I have to go dip off and have weekend vacations with my boo. Like, I don't know who I thought I was. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, because none of us in this room would ever think about doing something like that. Lying to our parents so we could be with our boyfriends, girlfriends, partners. Okay.
But what a great space to have an adult to go to have these conversations with. You put that most important thing, you planted that seed in me to make safety important. And again, this love and this guidance coming from a man is going to translate into my relationships
Mm.
and how I receive love from men. So it's very powerful early on, Dad. I had no clue what you were doing, but great, great job. Same thing with cussing. I remember you allowing me to cuss at a very early age. And like all the adults in my life
Next
would be
topic.
like,
Next.
all adults in my life would be like, no, no. But as a
Yeah.
kid, you need that space to vent and get it out. And I was a terrible cusser, but it was still a safe space to be able to
Well, I
express
think
it.
you need to give them context about what that conversation was like instead of just saying you could cuss.
You
I
you
was
you
very
did
specific.
You did. You gave rules to it. I'm allowing you to cuss as long as it's not at me or towards other people, like in public, but you can use it to express yourself. I'm pretty sure those were the rules you
And
gave.
with your friends. I don't care about that. Like,
Right, right. Yes, you
yeah,
did say that.
but not adults or okay, good. Do you remember as a kid, then you're like maybe 7, 8, coming to my classes? So I used to be a psych professor, and I used to bring her to my classes when she would come visit, and she just loved that. She had the time of her life. My intent of bringing her that young an age was that she was hanging out with grown-ups and listening to the adult talk, and I was another way of trying to kind of let her know, hey, we can talk about any of this stuff. It's okay. Do you remember that, or do you think that worked at all? It was just a guess. It was on my part.
No, it did. Because again, this adult was having these very difficult conversations openly and sharing this space with me that I don't think a lot of kids are welcomed into because you're too young, you're not ready. And I never felt that with you. Things weren't hidden with you. And I know we're trying to do that as we protect our kids, but are you really protecting them? The truth hurts. That's a real thing. So let's be honest. Let's get it out there. And I learned so much from your classes and I loved watching you work. And I think had I not seen any of that, I wouldn't even be in a space to want to talk to audience like this. It's a very nerve-wracking thing for me. But watching you work is very inspiring. Watching you help people learn about themselves is amazing. And I want to be able to do the same thing. So I learned so much in those classes. I would take like
Too kind.
notebooks and write notes.
Too kind. Okay, last question, Shardy. And she does actually know this question because I ask it to her every time. But is there anything that I could be doing differently or better to show up for you as a parent?
So you like to call me out on my stuff a lot. And I love that because I need somebody that I care about to hold that mirror up to me and help me, see myself. Do you think you're as like open to that if I try to call you out on your stuff?
Whoa, whoa, okay, we went down south. Okay, so this demonstration now is concluded and we can move on. Thank you, Chardonnay, for your participation. Yeah, actually, this is interesting. It's interesting that when we did the demo recording, I forgot if it was Dion or Ashley or somebody said, or you, Chardonnay, was like, hey, why didn't Chardonnay interview you instead of you interviewing her? And I was like, yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, get you in the hot seat for once.
I'm not giving up that control. Besides, I'm the parent and I am right. No, it's a wonderful idea because, obviously with the perspective and history I have, I know how to ask the questions, but we've never done it the other way around, and I would be more than open to doing it that with you. So thank you, and thank you again for just being in this space with me and sharing with this group.
Thank you, Dad.
So here's what we're going to do, folks. Thank you, and I love you more than anything. So Maria's saying I would love to see that. Not this time, folks. But I actually, in all sincerity, really think it's a great idea, especially now that we've done this several times. It would be interesting to have her be the interviewer, and I am open to that. So what we're going to do, folks, we've done a lot of talking and sharing, and had some great questions. We'd really like to allow you to just reflect. We're going to put you in breakout rooms, and just talk about how any of this has resonated with you, how any of this could show up in terms of your work, or how it might apply to the families that you're supporting, anything at all. It's an open space. We'll do it for 13 minutes. We'll come back at 1:45, and then we'll move into our closing. How does that sound? Is that okay with everybody? Ashley, Bridget, Dion, just make sure we're on track.
That works.
Okay, let's do 13 minutes in session, and then or whatever to 1:45, and then we'll come back and close out.
Awesome. One moment, everybody. You will go to your rooms.
You're not.
We had a
Okay.
question also from our group about the resource, the guidebook.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate to folks that you all are more than welcome to use it and share it broadly. We want you to share it. So please, if you want to just attach it to an email and send it to every parent that you know, that is totally fine. We encourage it.
And the guidebook is wonderful. I mean, I'm not saying that because we helped create it. The team created it, but it is. I mean, all the questions in there are very, very specific to the work that you're doing. So please make use of it. Thank you, Ashley and Dion and Bridget, all the folks that helped us with that.
Welcome. Okay.
Okay, so I assume everybody's back or still coming. We just want to maybe take a few minutes if anybody has anything they want to share. Please, whatever was shared in your room stays in your room. That's fine. You don't have to say what was said, but anything else that might have moved, touched, or inspired or resonated with you, just maybe 2 or 3 shares. That's all we have to. Anybody at all?
I was trying to find the raise hand function, so please excuse me for not raising my hand. My screen's confused since I came back, but I think out of our room, we just really appreciate the information and the consistency part of what you said, showing up consistently. But I wanted to bring it back to a question that was asked earlier. I don't know if this is going to make more sense, but one of the things that was asked was when it comes to the boundaries of when you're in a relationship or you're dealing with your children, how do you not enable? So it's the giving, right? So sometimes you get into a situation and you're giving because you want to make things better. Excuse the noise in the background. You want to make things better, and you give maybe a little too much. And so that boundary, that line, you understand what I'm saying? Like, how do you not cross that line so that you maintain your boundaries so that they understand that this is a boundary, it's a line that you cross, but then you're also, hey, I'm here to make it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Caroline, a boundary that's not enforced is no longer a boundary. It is a useless concept. And I'm not saying that harshly. I'm saying that if you do have a line that's established, but then you waver around it, like one day it's yes, one day it's no, then they're not going to respect it. Boundaries not only have to be communicated effectively, but also agreed upon in terms of their understanding of it. And a lot of families, and I know providers are, they'll post it on the fridge, whatever. Here's the agreement, but they don't always work unless they are consistently honored. So that's my short answer to that, Caroline. I know that's probably not telling you the how, but certainly the why behind it.
I think it's great. I think the answer was great. And it wasn't necessarily my question, but when you answered it, I was like, oh, ow, okay, I feel like you're talking to me now.
So hey, look, I mean, right. I mean, all this stuff resonates with us differently depending on our own unique experiences, but that's because we're human, right? Like we want to get it right. That doesn't mean that we are. And I can't know that unless I'm willing to hear the feedback. Look, let me tell y'all something. You really want to hear some feedback, and this was on one of the slides. But do this with your partners. All ready? Ask them what it's like to be in relationship with you. Ask your partner, like humbly, openly, like not the partner is going to say, "Oh, you're great, yeah, it's wonderful." No, I mean the one that's going to give you the genuine feedback. Because if you ask that question, what's it like to be in a relationship with me? They'll probably list a whole bunch of wonderful stuff. Stuff is not so wonderful, right? And you got to be willing to listen to that. But if you want to be better or different in that relationship, you got to listen to it. You got to be able to take it. So, anybody else? Thank you.
Susan has her hand raised.
Oh, yes, I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Susan. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much, Sal and Chardonnay, for sharing this was wonderful presentation today. It opened up a lot of, in our group that Michelle and I opened up as well, that we had parents that weren't in our lives and I got to meet mine maybe once and twice, and now he's passed. And when he passed, which was like 2 years ago, and I'm over 40, and it's still a healing process. And I'm like, where am I at? And when he passed, I cried and I never really knew him. And you know, I always wondered, what did I do wrong? And I know it's not that. It's still a healing process, and I'm an adult, and I feel like I should be over this now, and I should be like okay with it, and I'm not. So I feel like, looking at y'all's relationship, I feel like, wow, that's golden, because you were not there. You built it back, and you guys work together, and that's like it's just golden to me. And I just want to appreciate you guys for sharing, and that helps others a lot. So I will continue to try to figure it out.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I'm gonna let Chardonnay respond to that one, especially the passing of a parent.
Yeah, I am sorry for your loss and the pain that you have to go through. I think losing a parent is one of the worst hurts anybody could experience, whether they're around you or not. They're a part of you. You came from them, and losing them is losing like a part of yourself. My mom is now passed a year and a half ago. And after I ran away, my aunt basically raised me. It allowed us to have this relationship where my mom really was just a friend parent. She didn't have to parent me, so I could go to her too for a lot of things, but it didn't feel like a parentship. I resented her a lot for that. Um, Ended up having to take her in when she was sick in her final days and taking care of her up until her last breath, um, which I was really, really angry about. I didn't understand why I had to take care of a parent that didn't take care of me. And as she got sicker and weaker, I really had to make peace with her failures and us not being able to have the relationship I wanted, and being able to see her in such this weak space. It really helped prepare it. I couldn't harbor any anger towards her. She was, in such a, this is just like, death is such a scary and terrible and lonely place. So I ended up turning that pain into feeling honored that I got to spend that time with her and take care of her in that way and live with her as an adult and relearn things about her and have that new time together. So it is very difficult. I encourage you to continue um, just going into that place of asking those questions. I think the more you don't try to address it or just kind of wash it away, like, oh, I shouldn't feel this sad. No, feel sad. You deserve to have a parent around to love you in that way. And it does make it very difficult for you now to have those relationships and even accept that love from others. So um, yeah, I commend you. It's not easy, but thank you for sharing, Susan.
I think we probably need to close out. Oh, we got one more. Gina be our last one. Gina, you're muted, Gina.
Okay, Chardonnay, thank you for sharing your experiences, and it helps others to validate their experiences or the experiences that they potentially will go through. But something that I learned at an early point with my own children to say, and it's constant and it's real when I see other parents, is that kids don't come with a book. We're trial and error the first time, the second time, the third time around. So each time is a new experience. And so give grace. Give the same grace that you would want to receive. That's it. Thank you.
Beautifully said, and a perfect ending to this presentation in this workshop. Thank you so much, Gina. I'm going to pull up my screen and turn it back over to Dion.
Yes.
And I just thank all of you for how you showed up, how you shared today, how you supported this. We just truly appreciate you. And remember, the conversation can continue after our time together today ends.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Sal and Chardonnay, for joining us today. I tell you, every time I hear the two of you speak together, I'm just in awe of your brilliance and your authenticity and your passion for this work. So I truly commend you for the work that you do. And also an extra special thanks for being our inaugural presenters for our training academy. You are our first group to present, and what a way to start this training journey. So thank you all again. I'm going to go through some slides, but just wanted to touch briefly on some nuggets that I took away from your training today. And I'm just going to go in the order in which I wrote them down. The first thing I heard that stood out for me was that we need to acknowledge as parents when we might get it wrong, acknowledge that and be humble about it. That we need to understand that our children and give our children space to share. Then I moved on to conflict happens, and Sal said the conflict is not the issue, it's how you handle the conflict that's important. And then we were talking about working with families. There was a message about start walking with the families. Just walk with them, meet them where they are and walk with them. Understand trauma responses and how that frames behavior. Shar said something that I really love, that behavior is a language. And I love also what Shar said about starting with a compliment sandwich. Love that. Planting the seeds, watering it, remembering that pace analogy, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And then something that we just heard, that kids don't come with a book. They really don't. So we have to use this restorative framework. And I'll end with something that I put in the chat a couple of times in response to some of your comments, is that restoration is a longitudinal process. It takes time. And the guidebook that you all have will help you all on that journey as you use it personally or professionally. And we just hope that you all gain so much from this training today. And feel free to reach out to us afterwards. Wanted to just give another plug for the guidebook that's there. Yes, guidebook, and the link is there. You'll get the slides. Next slide. And again, you will receive a certificate of completion. You'll receive all of the materials, the recording, the slides, everything, whatever you want. Excuse me, whatever you want, you will receive it. Next slide. And please, 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 your feedback is important to us. You will receive a link to complete a survey. We will happily share that feedback with our presenters. And we also want to know how this training academy has been for you all. So please complete the survey. And once you complete the survey, as I mentioned earlier, next slide, I think the next slide is about, yes, our continuing education hours. You will receive up to 2 hours for your participation today, which is a great resource for many of you who need that. And then next slide. Yes, our System of Care Virtual Summit will be held May 14th through 16th. We hope to see all of you there. If you haven't registered, please register. It's going to be a great time. We have wonderful sessions planned, something for everyone. So please take the time to visit the website and register. It's coming up here pretty shortly, so please register right away. Next slide. And these are ways in which you can stay connected with us via our website, social media. Please stay connected. Any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And I think we have one more slide. Yes, and we're just going to end with SAMHSA's mission, as they're funding all of the work that we're able to provide for you all. But thank you all again for your wonderful participation, engagement, and time and attention. And we look forward to seeing you at our next training academy, which will happen in June. Visit our website for more details. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.
Awesome.